I made the decision that if I could get through this injury and be fit enough to compete in 2013, then I was going to do it all in. I was put an application in to get a sabbatical from work so that as soon as the Open started in 2013, I would be on a break from work. I wouldn't be coaching any more classes. I would literally, the Open started, I'm all in on competing.
You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. How we doing, Tony?
Doing good. Good morning.
It's Friday. Birds are singing. 85 degrees today, so could be worse.
Good. Summer's coming.
That's right. That's right. Well, hey, today, for all the fellow CrossFit nerds out there, we have a really awesome guest. We have Sam Briggs with us here today. For many, she does not need an introduction, but for those that aren't tracking, I'll give one real quick. She's an 11 times competitor of the CrossFit Games, most notably in 2013 when she won it, became the fittest woman on earth. She was also top 5 on 4 different occasions, and for those that are familiar with the sport, know how difficult that is, and that kind of consistency is just insane. Prior to doing CrossFit, she was a firefighter in West Yorkshire. And then obviously got into the CrossFit thing, retired in 2022 from CrossFit and now is firefighting in Hamilton, Ohio. In addition, Sam released an autobiography in 2020 called Start Your Engines, My Unstoppable CrossFit Journey. So Sam Briggs, welcome to the Born Primitive Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So a lot I want to unpack, as a CrossFit nerd myself, I want to get into a lot of that. But I think since you wrote the book, let's start there, and then we can kind of go down different rabbit holes. But what inspired you to write your book? And for the listeners and viewers, could you give an overarching summary what it contains?
Yeah, I mean, people had all been saying, especially since I won in 2013, about, oh, you're going to write a book, you're going to do this. And I kind of had like a few ideas, but I just didn't know how to kind of like start that process. And it was somebody that actually approached me, and they are a ghostwriter. So basically they just come and chat to me, and they then plot out into a book format. And so then the hardest part for me was going through and kind of editing, making sure that what he'd written was factual, and then making it in my tone, because sometimes he'd use a word or a phrase and I'm like, I would never say that. So it's then like making it so that it was actually like my words that were like coming out across in the book.
And how long?
And to summer, sorry.
And how long did that process take, kind of start to finish?
Probably around like 6 months.
Okay.
So there was a few in-person interviews to get the kind of like basis of the book done. And then there were a few like kind of Zoom meetings like this to where he thought like we could delve a little deeper into something, or we could explain a little bit more in areas. And then once the like rough book was written, to do my edits and stuff probably took around a month. Just to really fine tune things and make sure that I was happy. If it was going out for people to read, I wanted to be happy with what people were reading.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think what strikes me about you, Sam, being, in the space and, the way you competed, I don't think there's anyone in the sport. I mean, there's obviously a lot of great athletes that have come through CrossFit, but I think a lot would agree that what made you different was just the tenacity that you took to workouts and just the engine you had. You know what I mean? And it was like, as I recalled it, and again, this is my recollection, but you would come out so hard and you were just tenacious. And that's kind of like what you were known for. Just this gritty, obviously very talented, but it almost seemed like there was more grit than talent, and you were just tough. You were just tough as nails. And I that was. I
don't think I'm the most talented. Definitely don't think I'm the most talented athlete. I didn't come from a gymnastics background or anything like that. But something that was always instilled in me was kind of like hard work and digging deep. So I think what allowed me to become a good CrossFit athlete was the fact that I was willing to suffer. Uh, and a lot of the CrossFit workouts involve suffering. So the more you can suffer, the better you can do.
Yeah, and it was almost like there were certain workouts you knew that's a Sam Briggs workout because of the how deep into that pain cave you knew you'd have to go. And that's usually where we would see you thrive. So you won 2013, right? That was the year you won it?
Yep.
Yeah, so I competed at the games that year as well. I was in the team division though, so not as cool as you guys in individuals. So I got to be a part of that, and obviously the tennis stadium and the soccer stadium and just that whole vibe in Carson was so epic. So
yeah.
What was it like? So I know you had to take 2012 off to injury, and then you were able to come back and win it the following year. So walk us through what happened with the injury, and just from a human performance standpoint, I'm curious, I'm sure Tony is too, of kind of what you did, when you took the time off to rehabilitate your injury and then come back a better athlete. A lot of people that would be really hard to bounce back from, but you came back and literally won the damn thing. So walk us through how you approach that, and, just from a physical, even mental angle, and then, how you felt coming back into the 2013 season.
Yeah, so 2011, I came fourth, just narrow missing out on the podium. So kind of all like the whole focus and whole intention of the 2012 season was to make it back to the games and be stood on the podium. So when I suffered my knee injury, I was definitely in denial for like so long. I was still training. I was still trying to do things, even though I was in pain and not being able, I'd get through training and then not be able to kind of like live life. I'd just be in pain all the time. So it was actually my coaches that pulled me from the games season, and I was still in denial. I was like, I could do this when the open workouts were released. I could do that one. And they're like, no, you are not doing it. We're going to sit this season out. So once I'd actually like got my head around that I wasn't going to be competing, it was obvious to me just how much CrossFit and competing meant to me. So I was working full time as a firefighter at the time. We'd just opened our own affiliate in Manchester in the UK. So I was also like coaching and doing stuff as well as trying to train full time. So I made the decision that if I could get through this injury and be fit enough to compete in 2013, then I was going to do it all in. I was put an application in to get a sabbatical from work so that as soon as the Open started in 2013, I would be on a break from work. I wouldn't be coaching any more classes. I would literally, the Open started, I'm all in on competing. And then regarding like becoming a different athlete, the Sam Briggs of 2010, 2011, I was fit enough to be at the games, but I wasn't a good mover. Like my lifting technique and stuff like that, I just kind of had raw strength from being a firefighter. So I worked with a movement coach and kind of like worked on my mobility, worked on technique. And so that when I was actually able to start loading and doing CrossFit again, I was moving a lot better. I started working with a gymnastics coach as well to try and refine my gymnastics skills. So that finally, when the 2013 season rolled around, I looked like a completely different athlete, but I still had my fitness and my engine that I had that got me to the games in the first place.
Awesome. So you were able to sand the edges a little bit and work on some skill components. And I think that tenacity and that engine is the hardest one to get, right? That's just something you have deep down inside. And walk me through that season. I'm sure you obviously breezed through the Open. Were you peaking at the right time as you got into what it would have been regionals at the time? I know it sounds like you went full time kind of starting at the Open, so that you probably had a pretty good progression by the time you got to Carson.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was obviously not working nights anymore. So just that recovery. And just then also having the time. I reached out to Lindsay Valenzuela, who at the time was another athlete that was going to be pushing for the podium, and was like, "Hey, I love the kind of vibe you bring to competing." She was the complete opposite athlete to me. She was obviously all strength and power. I was endurance. Would you want to do some training together? So I actually like spent quite a bit of time with Lindsay training the 2013 season before regionals, and then we did all our training leading up to the games.
Yeah, she was. What year? What did she get that year? 'Cause she was always kind of a crowd favorite as well.
Yeah, she took second.
Second.
So yeah.
That's
So I
awesome.
definitely think pushing each other in training definitely like helped. So that was just kind of like the perfect scenario there.
And walk us through like a full weekend in Carson. You know, just the toll that it took and the ups and downs. You know, because I think the unique thing about CrossFit is like there's such variance in the styles of workout that you'd be surprised. Now, maybe like Tia and Matt, when they would win a bunch of events, but a lot of champions, and Rich included, like it's not like you guys are winning every event. You know, it's a fifth, it's an eighth,
Yeah.
it's an 11th, it's a fourth. And you look at it, you're like, oh, that's not really not that impressive. And then they're first overall. You know what I mean? Whereas, so because there's just it's so random in the movement. So obviously, if you have your gymnastics specialist, that person's going to win that workout. But then it's a 1 rep max or it's a 5K run or whatever it is. So very rarely do you see athletes that just kill every one.
Yeah.
But so from an athlete standpoint, it's a little bit of an emotional roller coaster because the first workout might be your worst one for the whole weekend, and you're in 26th place, but you end up winning the damn thing because all the other workouts kind of line up. So walk us through kind of how that weekend went. I know it's been a minute. And then ultimately, obviously, when you're standing on that podium, what it felt like, particularly after coming back from having to sit a whole season out and watch from the sidelines.
Yeah, I mean, obviously like you're talking about like placing different positions and stuff. Uh, I'm probably one of the clearest on the leaderboard of champions. Like I definitely have workouts where I'm coming in the bottom five, but then I have workouts where I know I can go and win. So I can kind of like make up for those losses. I think a lot of the other champions just tend to be hanging around the top all the time and may have one worse workout, whereas I'm definitely more of a yo-yo athlete. But luckily, like at the time, there would always be like at least a few workouts that I knew that I could go and win and get those 100 points to make up for having those worse ones. So it was definitely you can't get too beat up on yourself when you have a bad workout. It's kind of like, right, okay, I acknowledge the result, move on to the next workout. You've still got like 14 more workouts to go or whatever it is.
Well, the good thing is you don't have that much time in between workouts, right? Where you can quickly put it in the rear view. And we've talked about this before, but there's other sports. We've had some MMA fighters on here, and what a wild thing that is. Where a busy year for you is 3 fights in a year. You know what I mean? And if you lose, some guys got to wait. They got to wait a whole year just to fight one more fight, and the fight might last 60 seconds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you drop 8 spots, and you got to climb right back up. Where there's other sports where it's so repetitive. You know what I mean? You get right back up there. Baseball, right? You get your
next day.
Yeah, or your next at bat, right? Yeah. Or football, next play. You guys with CrossFit, so it's and that goes both ways. You can't then celebrate it too much because you might get your ass handed to you in the next workout, or you might strike out.
Yeah.
You might get that that RBI down the line, exactly. And then you backwards K. Then so it's the psychology of sports is fascinating, but I think regardless, short-term memory, is kind of the way to go. Kind of keep that even keel regardless of what you're doing. But how did it feel when you were on the podium, and was it what you expected? And once you won, were you hungrier to win it again the next year, or was it hard to kind of stay? I think that the biggest thing with CrossFit that a lot of people don't realize is particularly for you guys at that level, is the level of commitment it takes is just so intense. And it's pretty much all year round. Like, you guys don't really do much of an off season, at least as I have observed it. And it's not like a pro golfer or some of these other sports where, you know what I mean, there's more longevity. I mean, you guys are just beating the crap out of yourselves every single day, and it's just this constant cycle of destroy your body, sleep, hydrate, recover, deep tissue, etc. And it's just, you just continue to do that. So were you able to stay hungry all of those years, or were there ever times that I imagine, if you're human, this is probably yes, where you were kind of like, man, can I do another season? Can I do another grind? Because it's kind of seems never ending.
Yeah, I think especially those OG CrossFitters, like that started, and like Dan Bailey's another perfect one that springs to mind, where you see him still trying to train when he's just torn his quad muscle. We all started for the love of CrossFit. It was never starting for like the prize money or anything. There wasn't really anything back then. And the way that we used to train as well, it was always more is better. The more we can hurt, the more we beat ourselves up, the better. I definitely think that aspect has changed for the better. A lot of people now are working with experienced coaches, experienced coaching teams. So that even though there's not really a clear, distinct off season, people do tend to pick competitions a lot better now. And it's not, oh, I have to do every competition because I've got to keep my sponsors happy. I've got to earn this money to try and live as a CrossFit athlete. There's a lot more now people able to earn a living from competing in CrossFit and not have to kill themselves like every week. So I do definitely think that has improved. But yeah, like winning in 2013, I was hungry for more. 2014, I would say a fitter, stronger Sam Briggs going in like to the season, but unfortunately things didn't go my way and I wasn't able to like prove that at the games, but I was hungrier than ever.
And Sam, something we've talked often about, I know Ariel Lone, we talked about it, then like Rich Froning also discussed it with him, is Ariel had kind of an awakening to what you just said about like thinking that more was always more. She had a daughter, was only able to train for like an hour a day, was doing just the class at her local CrossFit gym, and realized through that, although shorter time frame, she approached that with like an extreme intensity, and she actually got fitter from that, whereas before she was spending 4 or 5 hours a day. So how did that journey throughout your career? And then Rich was kind of the opposite end of that example, where he was the volume guy, like just doing insane amounts. So how did your journey, it sounds like at some point you maybe recognized, I mean, the fact that you were working nights is absolutely insane as well, to think about training that hard then working nights. But what was kind of the arc for you throughout your career of like maybe thinking more is more and just training yourself into the ground, and then eventually taking a step back and obviously still bringing an intensity to training, but maybe doing a little less than you previously had?
Yeah, I think like 2014 not making it to the games, I like thought the only answer was kind of killing myself in training. I basically entered every off-season competition that I could do. I had a killer of a season outside of like not making the games, but then roll around 2015 when the Open's about to start, the week before the Open, I had a herniated and 2 bulging discs in my back. And then just before regionals that year, I broke my foot. I managed to still qualify for the games, still compete at the games. And then 2016, before the games, I tore my labrum, bicep tendon. And so I competed at the games in 2016 with a torn labrum. And that's when I was like, something's like, I thought I was going to have to retire in 2016. I was like, I've just spent 2 full seasons where I've just been injured the whole time, still being able to just compete, but not being able to compete at full capacity because I'm carrying these injuries. So I had to have shoulder surgery in 2016. And then the decision to, do I want to still compete? Is my body able to still compete? And that's when I started working with my coach that I'm still with now, and just looking at volume and how can we do things differently and kind of more like sustainably.
Yeah, and did you like it sounds like the coach, obviously that was a huge catalyst for you kind of making that change. Were there other modalities that you started integrate? I mean, I see the sauna behind you, but throughout your career, did you start to recognize the different things, whether it was sleep or obviously nutrition and sleep are the ones always talked about, but did you start integrating other things that kind of helped on the recovery side as well?
I've always been a big component like for sleep. Obviously working nights definitely didn't help. But then once I wasn't working as a firefighter, I've always like been big on getting enough sleep and eating right. I think the main thing was just like the one condition that my coach made. He said, I would love to get you back to like full fitness and competing after surgery. He's like, but I'll only do it on one condition. And I'm like, what? He's like, I control everything. He's like, you don't do any stuff on your own. You don't go doing extra stuff. You don't go doing stuff on the side. It's like, what I write is what you do. And so that was like pretty hard for me because I've done a lot of my own programming and kind of like picking and choosing, and I would work with a few different coaches. Like I'd get my Olympic lifting from one coach, my gymnastics from another, powerlifting from another, and then I'd make up my own conditioning, make up my own like cardio pieces and piece things together. Another example, kind of like of another Rich, where it was like the more volume, the better. It's like I'm picking this, I'm picking that, and oh, I'm not doing anything here. I'll put something else in. And he's like, no more of that. He's like, what I write, you do. So it was definitely hard for me to like accept that. But I was like, I will try.
And do you find, I think Patrick Vellner was kind of on the opposite end where he obviously is very disciplined in his training, but as far as like even his diet and recovery and like, I think he referenced watching TV, like he needs that flexibility built in, or he feels kind of trapped by like just the like super, super disciplined approach. Where do you kind of sit on that spectrum? Do you thrive when things are very, very dialed in and you're able to just execute, or do you need to have some kind of flexibility in order to feel at ease?
No, I love routine. I love like things in order. And it's one thing that Nicole like makes fun of me sometimes. She's like, God, you're such a robot. And I'm like, yeah, but it's so much easier. I don't have to make any decisions. It's like, that's just what I do.
Yeah, it's interesting the spectrum of that and kind of just how personality plays such an influence on kind of where you fit in that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember, I won't name them. It's not like I'm outing them, but we had some athletes out here in Virginia Beach that we sponsored that, we were doing a bunch of content shoot, and, so they're here for a couple days. And of course, like all the meals have to be figured out. You know what I mean? They weren't like in season, but I remember we had dinner one night and it was like, we got dinner at like 7:30 and it was 8:15 and the food hadn't come out yet. And one of the athletes had to go home. This is like a Saturday night and was like, I need to be in bed like 20 minutes ago, and ended up leaving and didn't eat dinner with us. So, we're supposed to like all meet up and, this. Yeah. And I was like, and I don't fault it. That was the dedication. And then another athlete brought a food scale and was weighing her raspberries at breakfast. And I'm just sitting there like, are you really weighing your raspberries? You know what I mean? So again, I appreciate it, but then you got guys like Patrick that are a little bit more lax of like, you know what I mean? In it's, whatever works for you. Yeah. But it was cool to kind of witness that's where you find that 1%, you know what I mean? Is of course sleep is so huge. We all know that, even though a lot of us don't embrace it like we should, but it was just kind of cool to witness that perspective. Okay, well, that's what it takes to be at that level. You know what I mean? So.
Sam, have you? Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say so I eat healthy, I eat clean, but there's one thing that I've never been able to do is the weighing and measuring and tracking food. That annoyed me. Like the time on your phone to like log everything. Like I've tried like on various times, and I'm like, No. So I'm definitely more of a intuitive eater, but it's more because of like the weighing and tracking just annoyed me so much. Like if somebody could just tell me you need X amount of this, X amount of that, and I was like, okay, I can eat the same thing every day, the same values, that's fine. As long as somebody just tells me. If I have to weigh it out and log it all, I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. Sorry.
I agree.
I tried that once for like a month. I think it was like the MyFitnessPal.
Yep.
It's a total pain in the ass, man. And then if you go to
Yeah.
dinner, you got to like try to figure out, oh, that was like a 10-ounce ribeye, and let me go find it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like,
And are your guesses ever right? You're
yeah.
either undershooting, overshooting. So I'm like, oh, it's okay. If I'm hungry, I'm gonna eat.
Yep.
Sam, I'd love to talk about something we just had we've done it with Ben Zobrist, who won a World Series, and then we just had an NFL player who had won a Super Bowl. Is we kind of talked through their transition at the end of the career, and it's always interesting to find that some do it almost seamlessly, where like they finish their sport and they're able to integrate back into daily life without any huge issues, and then there's others where it's like they go through a whole ego kind of identity crisis when they're finished with the sport, and I think rightfully so. Like we were former athletes. Obviously, you're an athlete at even a higher level, and like it becomes such a part of you that once you're done, it can be challenging to reintegrate in a way that kind of like you lose the thing you were so passionate for. So did you have any of that? Like as you decided to retire, did you find like you had some identity loss there, or and I know as a firefighter that probably. I know there's a lot of camaraderie there, but did you find any of that as you transitioned out of the sport?
I think because I had it lined up to go to get back into the fire service, like pretty much straight after. So 2022, I did semifinals, um, and then I was at the games coaching Emma McQuaid, and then literally we flew back. I think I had a week, and then I was in the fire academy. So like I didn't have any time really. Like I did my last major competition. I was then helping Emma with her prep for the games. She was over here, staying with me. And then I was out there coaching her. I literally came back and I think I had a few days, and then I was in the fire academy, which was like Monday through Friday for 3 months, and then I was straight into work straight after. So I didn't really have any time to dwell, but then kind of I also wasn't meant to compete in 2023, and then still did the Open and still went to the games and competed as a master. So kind of like I retired, but then still kind of by accident still competed.
Well, it's funny. I mean, that kind of happened with Scott Panchik. You know, he kind of was like, all right, I'm done. And he's just doing like the class, you know, a few days a week. But then he realized he's still crazy fit. He did the Open and then just got some crazy Open score. And you're like, wait a second, you're only training 5 hours a week now. You used to train 20 hours a week. How does, you know what I mean? So it's, I think part of it is you guys have trained so long that the body remembers, you know what I mean? Like some of that has to still be there.
Definitely. Yeah.
Your body's just kind of used to that. So it's cool that you were able to still hang. And so did you have to go through a fire academy a second time to get like recertified?
I did. And then starting at work, I was then in probation, I was the new person. I'm cleaning the toilets, cooking all the food. Start right back from the beginning.
So okay, and I know in the military that's similar too. Like there's kind of a new person, we call it new guy break-in period. So you had to do that twice. Then they didn't recognize that you had already been one, and so they gave you no credit for that, huh?
No credit. And back before I retired, before I resigned from firefighting in the UK, I was like the equivalent of your guys as captain. So and then I'm like right back at the beginning. No authority. I can't even speak anything. Just listen.
So we got a former world champion, 11-time CrossFit Games athlete, former basically fire captain who's now making the coffee and cleaning the stalls. That's crazy. How did you?
Yep.
But that's cool. I mean, you know, you got to show humility. Was that difficult though? Like internally, like were you kind of like, come on now? Like,
honestly, like it was awesome.
Okay.
Like I'd been out of firefighting for so long, so going back to the academy was a great refresher. And then going back to being like the probationer and the new guy, it's like there was no like expectations of me, no like stress on me. I didn't have to make any decisions. I just go in, somebody tells me what to do, I do it. And it was just nice, I think, a nice change of pace after training for 8 hours a day or every day of the week and just being so like in that life to then I'm going to work and somebody tells me, right, go pull that hose off, go do this, do that, and just somebody just telling me what to do and me doing it. It was awesome. I'm ready for like I'm glad that's over now. I'm out of my probation. I'm now in the next chapter. I'm back in school now, training to be a paramedic. So working full time, school full time, and doing hospital clinicals at the moment. So my life looks very different right now to what it was.
Sam, what did you, and this is going to be a pretty broad and loaded question, but culturally between the UK and the US, as somebody who hasn't spent a significant amount of time there, now that you're living in the US, what are the biggest differences between the cultures, and then what are also some similarities between the two?
I would say there's a lot more similarities. Um, like personality wise and like just kind of like living life wise. The biggest differences over here is more to do with your portion sizes and the
A lot bigger.
yeah, but everything's bigger. Like everything's spaced out more. Your houses are bigger, your supermarkets are bigger, your food portion sizes are bigger. The UK, it's obviously a smaller island, and I feel like everything's smaller, which then allows for other things. It's like I used to cycle or run and commute that way. It's really hard to do that over here. Like the roads aren't set up for people like to be cycling. There's very little like sidewalks if you wanted to walk somewhere. Like everybody's expected to just drive everywhere. So I think that's the biggest difference is people aren't as active over here in the every other aspects of life. Like people are still going to the gym, people are still active in that way. But then you think about if you go to the gym for an hour and then you're just sat the rest of the day, you can do everything in your car. You have drive through everything. Whereas in the UK, if you wanted to drive somewhere, you would still then have to pack up and walk to whatever you were going to. So I think there's a lot more activity outside of just gym life or sport life.
But you said like personality wise, it's not a big culture shock to go between the two as far as just like the everyday personality. And that would depend.
Yeah.
I mean, where you're at in the US is going to be
different.
It's going to be vastly different.
Yeah,
Sure
and that's we have like regional like differences. I think one thing as a majority, Americans are a lot more kind of like straightforward and clear with what they're trying to get across with what they're saying. In the UK, they try and skirt around it and find a nice way to say something. And so like we're very like if I do something very apologetic or like if I bump somebody, I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. Or if I wanted to say something that might not necessarily be the nicest thing, I'll try and skirt around it and find a way of making a not nice comment still a nice comment. We don't like conflict.
And do you, this was you can just tell me whether or not it's valid, but I've heard the generalization that more in the UK than in the US, it's kind of like the crab analogy. Like if you're the crab trying to crawl out of the bucket, the crabs will pull you back down. Almost in certain parts of the UK that like to try to like grow and become like a I don't know, like a better version is like a cliche way to say it, but like to kind of exit the caste you were born into or what your family is and kind of elevate yourself can almost be frowned upon. Is that a wrong generalization, or is that somewhat true to kind of the culture there?
I don't think so. Definitely not what kind of I experienced, but
yeah, and I think it was Chris Williamson's Modern Wisdom pod, and he's from the UK, so maybe right. Yeah, who knows? Maybe it was just like he was speaking to a specific example or something, but yeah.
Sam, I want to ask a little bit about being a first responder, because I think this is something a lot probably don't realize, and of course I've never done it either, so I'm making a generalization here. But I was in the military, and we've talked about this before. But we tend to get thanked for our service and all these things, and it's greatly appreciated. But I would always think, we need to be thanking our first responders more, because of what you guys do on a daily basis. And especially a lot of the mental health resources go to the military community, kind of PTSD. And while, yes, a lot of that is in the military, particularly when we were at war, those events are much less frequent. They tend to be in much higher intensity, but it's not like a repeated, exposure to traumatic events. It's usually maybe one major one, or depending on the community you're in, maybe a little bit more than that. But for you guys, I think it's interesting because you guys, depending on how your day goes, you might go to a scene of an accident and see someone that was killed, in a car accident, right? And that person's dead. Maybe it's, a 2-year-old that fell in the pool that you're pulling out of the deep end. Or, for our police officers, maybe it's a domestic violence situation where they go and there's some malnourished 3-year-old in the back bedroom that hasn't eaten in a day, and they got to see that. So you guys carry a lot of that with you, and then you got to come home and try to decompress and integrate back into just being a normal person. Is that a fair generalization? And I guess, how do you guys deal with that? Because I personally don't think you guys get enough credit. I talked about this before, but I flew into LaGuardia Airport, and this giant dude had a massive heart attack, and these firefighters were doing chest compressions, and the dude was dead. Everyone knew he was dead, and they're all kind of standing around, and I'm like, okay, that's a normal day for them. They just, they just watch this dude die and try to save his life, do mouth to mouth, and now they got to go home to their wife and kids, and hey, how was your day? Oh, I saw another guy die. And then of course the real danger of the job is when you're actually fighting fires. But I think, people tend to, they just like run into burning buildings and do this, and it's cool and sexy. And then there's the other part of the job. Same thing with our police officers, that you guys have to basically deal with a lot of shit that most of society is never going to be exposed to. So I'm curious how you've been able to deal with that. Has there been difficulties along the way? I know some people deal with that differently. There's guys in the military that saw traumatic shit, didn't affect them at all, and they're good to go. And then there's other guys that are changed forever because of what they were exposed to. So how has that been for you, and what have you done to kind of normalize your life despite being exposed to that, I would imagine, fairly regularly?
Yeah, I think like everybody finds different things. I think that was one of the things, like back when I was a firefighter originally, is like exercise was always kind of my outlet, which really helped me if I was having a bad day. It was kind of like, right, you do a sucky workout and you kind of helps you to like forget about it. Another thing is like you really do like make bonds. Like people sometimes laugh at when people say about, oh, it's like it's my family. You're working with, you do create these bonds with who you work with just because of the things that you're seeing. And that's a shared experience when you're seeing and dealing with these things, especially when you're trying to save somebody's life and you fail. We're not 100% successful. We can't save everybody, but then it's trying to remember the times that like you did, like you saved that person's life, you pulled somebody out of that building and now they're still living, or somebody was having a heart attack and you were there and you were able to like give them chest compressions, get them the medication and get them to the hospital. And like, so you've got to try and like focus on all the good that you're doing as opposed to the bad times. Because I think if you let all the bad times like consume your thoughts, and it's just going to dampen any of the good times, you're going to see more gray days than sunny days.
And have you seen over the years the emphasis on mental health and like the resources that are allocated to that? Has that improved? Is it more is it more top of mind now?
Yeah, definitely. So our department is in the process at the moment of where we're getting therapy dogs. So on each shift, there'll be a therapy dog because they've found that like when you've come back from a traumatic experience, like having to look after somebody who's going to be loving, and somebody who's just going to focus all their attention on you and be so happy that you've just come back, like helps people from traumatic experiences decompress. So our department's just in the process. We should be getting them later this summer. We're going to be getting therapy dogs at the station. So I mean, I have my own therapy dogs. One's just sleeping next to me right now.
Look at that guy.
Oh, look at that, man. He looks comfortable. I wish I was
Yeah,
asleep on the couch right now. I got 0 hours of sleep last night. Yeah, so I'm we're trudging through it today.
Yeah. What initially attracted you to that to being a firefighter, Sam? Did you have a family member, or was it just something you kind of had a passion or found a passion for?
No, so I decided that I wanted to kind of do something more active as a career, and something that I felt that I was doing kind of a service. And my mum used to be a nurse when I was younger, and my dad was a police officer. So originally I was kind of looking at either police, fire, or I was also looking at joining the Air Force. And um, I got through the police and the fire service both to interview stage, and so I was kind of like weighing up the pros and cons. And I was definitely leaning more towards the fire, so I decided to give firefighting a shot, and I loved it. Like, if I hadn't have been so successful with CrossFit, I would have never left. I would have still been a firefighter. And that's what made the decision kind of to go back to firefighting, like the obvious one. A lot of people were like, oh, we thought you'd start coaching. We thought you'd do this and that. And I was like, no. I was like, I don't mind coaching, but it's not my passion. Like, I love being a firefighter. It's definitely kind of like in me.
It's a calling, right? Because we sponsor Stipe Miocic, who was a former heavyweight champion in the UFC. I think he's like a 6-time champ, and hopefully he'll get it back. But he has been firefighting throughout his career, right? Which is wild, because I mean, you're the heavyweight champion of the world, and you're still in your training camp. During fight camp, you're literally going and working a shift, which is wild, because the guy you're fighting is going sleeping and getting a massage and going to a float tub and all these things, and he's got to go throw gear on and run with the crew for a while. So that it's cool. There must be something in y'all's DNA that calls you towards it, because of course a guy like him, he doesn't have to do that anymore, right? He's made plenty of money, but he's back there in Ohio doing it, right, which is really awesome. And same for you. I'm sure you could have taken other career paths that were probably a little bit easier and less dangerous. And the fact that you went back through the academy again and was a new person again with your crew is so cool. And I think you're probably right where you're supposed to be, because if that was your calling and it drew you back, that's what you were meant for. So that's so neat to hear that.
Definitely the right career for me.
And if you do a certain amount of years, or I guess I'm guessing your old time probably doesn't count because it was in the UK as far as getting like your pension or retirement, or did they count some of that?
No, they didn't count any of it.
Oh man, that stinks. So how many years you got to do to get the retirement benefit?
Potentially I'll still be fighting fires when I'm 65.
Oh jeez.
Well, young.
I reckon I can still do a good few years in me. But I'm thinking that towards the end of my career, I might be looking for more of a desk job, maybe going into fire investigation, something like that, where I'm still part of the job, but I'm not actually going to have to go and put a fire out.
Well, if there's anyone that could hang until you're 65, I think it's you, Sam. I have no doubt in saying that. But I think that's a transition is probably smart at some point, so you can let that body heal up a little bit. Anything else you got, Tom?
No.
Well, Sam, anything you want to plug for the audience?
I don't know. So I'm a big, like, I just showed my little pup, and my other pup is actually at my table for my laptop right now. So I'm a big lover of pit bulls, and Barbells for Bullies right now are doing a fundraising event to raise money for spaying and neutering dogs, and it's called Ruck Your Balls Off.
Okay. Rock your balls off.
So it's you've got to do a ruck and raise money to get strays neutered and spayed. So that's a big it's close to my heart with having 2 rescue pit bulls. So if anybody likes rucking and likes pit bulls, then check out Barbells for Bullies and help raise some money to help all the stray dogs out there.
Awesome. Well, Sam, I know you're very busy. We appreciate you taking the time to tune in. And as someone that's watched you over the years, that I know it's a previous chapter in your life, but it was so cool to see you compete and the reaction that the crowd would have when you would get announced to come out on the floor for that final heat, and just the tenacity that you brought to the workouts. I think that to me is the unique part about you, and of course all the other athletes were tenacious, but there was just something different when you went out there and competed that the audience could sense and feel, and I think that's why you've always been such a fan favorite. So thank you for sharing some of that with us, and wish you the best, and please obviously stay safe and tell the crew to stay safe, and we really appreciate what you guys do for our communities as well.
No, thank you, and thank you for having me on. It's been a great little chat and a great trip down memory lane.
There it is. Thanks so much, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.